In Fallout New Vegas, after waking up with a minor headache, the player as the courier is free to explore the Mojave. Given the objective of returning a bullet to its sender, while the player can make it their priority to do so, there's also the option of going anywhere else. New Vegas might be the title, but the key selling point of the game is that on the journey to make it there, the whole map is open to explore. The open world genre in a lot of ways feels like the natural next step in evolution for video games. In a medium made unique by our ability to interact with it, the desire to explore these worlds feels like an extension of our natural curiosity. While most visual media are experiences that come to us preordained, games like New Vegas give us the chance to make our own way through a place that has yet to see us coming. When you step out of Doc Mitchell's house with the seemingly endless desert of the Mojave on the horizon, the unspoken promise made to the player is that they'll be the one in control of walking across it. But what happens when the world is actually closed? With the Dead Money DLC, the courier can tune into the Sierra Madre radio station, where the promise of countless riches might lead them to the Sierra Madre casino itself. The first thing you'll probably notice about the place is the cloud, the haunting red mist that blocks both your pathways throughout the villa, but also your vision of anything outside of it. By every metric, the Madre is closed off from the outside world. Being trapped inside with an unremovable bomb collar, it's all you can do to follow the quests and do what they tell you. Stuck between the villa's walkways or the halls of the casino, there are only ever a few fixed paths you can take to get to where you need to go. Although the game tells you can go where you want to explore first, with locked doors and only so many ways to open them, you're actually just deciding an order. While you can decide to go to the wrong place first, aside from correcting yourself and making your way to where the game actually wants you to go, your only real free choice is to just stop playing. Before you even make it to the Madre, the first thing you're liable to do in your playthrough is to plan a path from Goodsprings over to Vegas. While you could, in theory, head north or east for a quicker path, it's pretty obvious the game actually wants you to head south instead. Although there's nothing physically stopping you from heading another direction, there are a handful of things that you'll run into that'll make trying feel wrong. Up north through Quarry Junction, it'll be a horde of angry Deathclaws. On the other hand, heading east through Black Mountain or through the cemetery is gonna put you up against either a bunch of centaurs or these fucking things. No matter which alternate path you pick, given the courier's low starting health and early game weapons, you're probably gonna die. The thing is though, while you're pretty much destined to fail, it's still your failure to have. It is technically possible to make it through these routes, but in most cases, and for most players, it's not really worth it. The path down from Primm isn't the main path just because the game tells you so, but because everything else in the game is set up to make you think you came to that conclusion yourself. Although we are given the freedom to explore, whether or not we notice it, the countless choices and brand new routes that we invent for ourselves in our playthrough have actually been rigged from the start.
And then you run wires that connect them all, and again, it just works.
In 2021, Todd Howard announced a release date for Bethesda's brand new IP in over 20 years. Following the failure of Fallout 76, Starfield was to be a return to form to the original open world formula that put Bethesda on the map. Except, instead of having just one world to explore, Starfield would give us over 1,000. All sorts of different planets that we'd be able to land on and explore whenever and however we wanted. It turns out though that when the game actually shipped in 2023, the biggest problem with its design was the fact that we got exactly that. All of the game's roughly 1,500 planets are true open worlds, in the sense that you can land on them whenever you want and wherever you want. Any point you pick on any given planet will generate a unique landscape that is completely yours to explore. It's yours to wander, yours to get lost in, and yours to get bored with. While limitless freedom might sound like it fits perfectly with exploration, the ability to go wherever you want means nothing unless the game gives you something to want in the first place. While New Vegas might be mostly open desert, the points in between all give you reasons to walk through it. Although you are technically free to explore the open world, the game's set up so that the way you do it is pretty likely to be the way that Obsidian's already planned for. After taking the south route through Primm towards New Vegas, your next step on the main quest is Nipton. For the most part, it's mainly there as an introduction to the Legion, one of the game's factions that you otherwise probably wouldn't encounter until much later in your playthrough. As such, even if you decide to ignore the place, the game will try and give you a few nudges to go back anyway. If you choose to ignore the city and head further south, you'll run into the NCR's Mojave outpost. If you ask if anyone there has worked for you, you'll be directed towards one of the snipers who'll ask you to investigate the town and report back on what all the smoke is about. At the same time, if you head east instead, cutting through the desert, you might find the Brotherhood of Steel bunker. In order to get their trust to walk around freely inside, you'll be asked to do a few favors, including a check-in with one of their scouts just outside Nipton. The entire map is designed as a series of bottlenecks funneling you through and out of pre-made experiences that feel unique. While it's true we can make and take whatever paths we want, a lot of what we want happens to lead us to the same places. What makes walking through the desert fun isn't the act of walking by itself, but the idea that doing it means we're gonna find something, which ironically means that exploring actually feels the most authentic when we're really being directed. Taking it a step further, games like Mario 64 or Mass Effect make exploration feel real by putting players in what ultimately amounts to a series of level selects. As a kind of bridge between classic and modern game design, hub-based games give players the feeling of exploration without needing the scale that would come with it. Being the first truly 3D release in the franchise, Nintendo decided that Mario 64 needed to take advantage of that. Each bit of gameplay wasn't just to be levels to play through, but worlds for Mario to exist in. Bowser, having kidnapped Princess Peach, has locked her away in a painting, but instead of chasing after him like previous entries, Mario already knows where they are. The gameplay loop instead lies in exploring, leaping into these other painted worlds to find enough stars to unlock the one Bowser has Peach in. With every painting being inside its hallways, Peach's castle is an entire game in and of itself, being the one place that the player will continue to come back to throughout their entire playthrough. When they're done completing another world, to get to the next means exploring the castle just a little bit more. Whether it's searching for hidden collectibles in the empty rooms or running through the countless hallways leading you between them, this hub, this home, is basically a menu screen. Hypermediation is the term used to describe how aspects of obvious game design like UI can actually make us feel more immersed. Although we know that item counts and point trackers aren't real parts of the game's universe, we're also able to accept them anyway as long as it makes the experience feel more real. The thing with menu screens though is that while we accept them, it also means our perception of these worlds become incomplete. The world of a game like the original Doom doesn't feel like a world at all, with every level asking you to stop playing entirely before clicking on and magically teleporting to the next. These levels feel more like an anthology. Although we obviously know the level select isn't the way Doom Guy actually explores the outside of the Mars facility, it's the only way that we can. Without the chance to see what leads us in between, this entire planet feels less like a world we can explore, but more like a series of places we can just take turns visiting. In terms of game design, Peach's castle serves the same purpose as separating main levels, with each painting being just one button press away from teleporting into a new level. But unlike a menu, the castle isn't just part of a game, but it's also part of the world inside it. It's not somewhere you're expected to skip through to get back to the gameplay loop, but it's a real physical place you can stay as part of it. In Mass Effect 2, the player as Commander Shepard has to return to their ship, the Normandy, between every single mission. Being set in space, every location is quite literally a separate world. So, when they're tasked with putting a crew together for the game's conclusive suicide mission, it's the player's choice as to where to fly to first. That includes who they want to recruit, which upgrades to get, and most importantly, what order to do all of that in. Kinda. While the game definitely gives you real choices in the narrative, your options to explore the Milky Way are only what the game wants. It's not so much that the game subtly directs your movement, but rather there is no direction because there's only one way to go anyway. In favor of soft-locking players into an ideal route, a hard lock means the player can't leave that route in the first place. When the player checks the Normandy's console, there are almost always a handful of missions to pick from, a handful that often aren't mutually exclusive. Although you technically could just skip recruiting a few members or ignore their loyalty missions, there's not really a reason to do so. In these situations, it's not so much that you're missing something while exploring, but instead you're deliberately choosing to ignore something you're actually being told to do. While it might be a fake choice in that clearly one option is preferred, the availability of the alternative, whether we take it or not, makes it feel like our decision. What makes these games explorable isn't just the world, but the player's place in them. Even though the game forces us back into the ship or into the castle to progress, because we decide when to leave again, they still feel like places that we can choose to spend time in. Every time we go back to the ship to get a new location from a squad mate, every time we return to the castle to unlock a new door, it feels like the world gets just a bit bigger. But for some games, it's easier to make a world feel open by actually making everything smaller. Released in 1997, the original Final Fantasy VII was to completely revolutionize the franchise, something in most measures it succeeded in. With the move from the NES to the more beefed up PS1, Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix, was able to make the 7th entry in the franchise something truly revolutionary. But with all the upgrades and specs for performance, with how much the team wanted to include, the scope of the game was limited not by the console but the problem of storage. With the limited disk space of the CD format, Final Fantasy VII just barely fit across the 3 discs that they were allowed, totaling up to a whopping 1.5 gigabytes. To fit in everything the team wanted, in addition to cutting content, the content that did make it in also needed to be thinned. While the game does have high fidelity character models, those models are exclusive to combat. In more general gameplay, 7 saves on having to actively render in environments and characters by just not doing it. And that's something weirdly easy for us to tune out. With the way everything comes together, it just works. Although the characters on screen look like this, we can understand that in the context of the universe, they're actually meant to look like their portrait art. In a similar vein, that idea also carries over to the world itself. After the initial Midgar section, the player, after almost 5 hours of fixed paths, is led out to find Sephiroth, the main antagonist, by traveling across the planet. That gameplay loop takes place in the overworld. While visiting every specific location gives us an environment close to scale with the party, the world map, on the other hand, is completely shrunk down. Midgar is a massive city with countless areas and pathways to travel through, but the second you leave its walls, the place barely even comes up to Cloud's waist. Even though you're able to explore the entire map, that map isn't a world so much as a diorama. It's not really there for us to explore, but to give us the feeling that the characters are. In some ways, it's really somewhere adjacent to the design of a hub world. While each level is separated into these smaller sub-locations, the space in between is regarded as something we can fast forward through. While it might take us 5 seconds to travel over to the next town, from the context of the reduced scale, we still get the idea that we've actually come a long way. This world, or at least this miniaturized version of it, really just serves to give us the idea of exploring without any of the baggage that would come with actually letting us. Dark Souls is truly the Dark Souls of world design. It's kind of got a hub, but it's not a hub world, and while the game might not be an open world, it's certainly a non-linear one. When the player takes their first rest at Firelink Shrine, it's only the first of many. Designed with a series of looping and overlapping paths, each linear route diverges off into countless others that only lead back to more. Every time you take a new path, you'll actually be finding several, including a few back to some old ones, which in turn have their own new pathways. To me, while it might not be an actual open world, in some ways it actually feels more expansive. As counterintuitive as it might sound, it's the more linear parts of the game that actually make the game feel more open. I remember the first time I played Dark Souls, I didn't think much of Firelink Shrine. After all, every time I found myself back there, it was because I failed. As many times as I lost to the twin gargoyles or got skewered making it up to the church to get there, coming back to the fire was an experience that I never really chose. It just meant that I had died and I'd have to try it all again. But it was when I noticed a certain pressure plate that the game really changed for me. Once again, I found myself back at Firelink Shrine. Only this time, it wasn't because I died, but because I came back of my own volition. With the realization that I had just opened a shortcut back to where I came from, this place stopped being a reminder of every time I failed and instead became a memory of the time I actually succeeded. I think Dark Souls succeeds in its world design where a lot of open world games fail. These places aren't just checkpoints to walk through and clear, but locations that we can expect to change and evolve as we eventually find our way back to them. Every time you find a new way back to Firelink Shrine, with every new route leading somewhere old, it doesn't feel like there's less of a world to explore, but instead, it feels like it's gotten a little bit bigger. With so many secrets hidden around every corner, there never really comes a point where the linearity of its design really feels all that noticeable. While the closed world might sound mutually exclusive with exploration, the truth couldn't be more confusing. When we think of open world games, the first defining factor is freedom. But in a lot of ways, it's really the other way around. Where complete player choice gives us something closer to a game like Gmod, every other experience, regardless of its scale, is built on the premise that something will eventually stop us. Our choices to explore only mean something when we know that eventually we'll reach somewhere worth staying. The question shouldn't be how many paths do we need to make a world open, but instead, how many stops until it becomes closed. Yakuza Kiwami is an interesting example of a game that kinda lies somewhere in between, mostly cause it should probably just be called open. Kiwami takes place in Kamurocho, a fictionalized version of Tokyo's red light district. Alongside the crime drama of the main narrative, fittingly for the red light setting, the player can also engage in tens of hours of side activities, like singing at karaoke, playing bar games, mahjong, or just straight up side quests. Although it's definitely a story game, a substantial amount of the game's content is only accessible if you take the time to explore and find it. Almost every building with a clear doorway can be opened and walked into, whether it's a restaurant or a store. The game is designed to be open even if the world isn't, which leads to one of the only caveats. From top to bottom, it only takes about 3 minutes to run from one end to the other. At 0.2 kilometers squared, Yakuza's map is barely the size of most games' towns. But at the same time, a closed game like Dark Souls 1 is 1 kilometer cubed. Not squared, cubed, because the map also goes up vertically. Now, I'm not saying that because Dark Souls 1 is big, it should be an open world, nor am I saying that Yakuza isn't because it's small, but I do think it's important to consider that maybe the actual scale of a world doesn't matter so much as how expansive it feels. Being set in a city district, every bit of exploration means weaving between the various streets, taking turns and detours not just for fun, but because that's how buildings work. While you could argue that might limit your options, I'd say that's actually what gives you any in the first place. While Mass Effect might not let you fly the ship, the planets you do visit feel all the more important as the few choices you do have. You only have a few paths, but that doesn't mean they're not worth taking. Every moment of every day, we live our lives with the understanding that our time to keep doing that is limited. With each visit we make to a place, it comes with the understanding that it's one time further from the first, and one time closer to the last. But the world we're exploring, real or not, means something, because despite our limited time, we still choose to be there. In these closed worlds, while our options might be limited, we still get the choice of deciding how long we stay. Whether it's looping paths, recurring hubs, or even just nudging us in the right direction, these types of games are special, not because they give us a world to explore, but because they give us ones that we want to. And I think they're pretty cool.